When you think of tuberculosis, you probably think of some dark, dank, and dismal Victorian asylum, right? Then you probably haven't heard of the Rock Haven Sanatorium, a female-run, cottage-style healing center outside of Los Angeles. Hi, I'm Madeline Firestein, trained historian and criminologist, and this is Rooted in Place, making history approachable and accessible for everyone. The Friends of Rock Haven have been fighting for decades to preserve the remaining buildings and to tell the story of those who lived, worked, and died here. I was privileged to sit down and speak with Joanna Linkchorst, who works tirelessly alongside other organization members to overcome adversity, civic red tape, and blatant oversight when it comes to the history of Rock Haven. Well, thank you so much, Joanna, for joining me today. I'm really excited to learn about the history of Rock Haven and what the Friends of Rock Haven have been doing. So, could you give us a brief explanation about what the Friends of Rock Haven is and the mission they're trying to do at the site?
Well, the Friends of Rock Haven was formed to learn the history, preserve it, teach it, and to advocate on behalf of the community to get the park and museum that the city of Glendale told us they purchased the property to be.
Yes, excellent. So, what exactly is Rock Haven? For those who've never heard of it before, what happened there? Does it have a layered history? What exactly was that site?
Rock Haven was a women's sanitarium founded in 1923 to be run only by women, only for women, to
That's
give them
unique.
safe, dignified treatment in a home-like setting. It is currently about 15 structures on around 3.5 acres.
Wow, I've never actually heard of ones that were meant to be run by women only. Now, was the women who ran this, was it mainly was a benevolent society? Were these kind of trained nurses and physicians?
Well, you can certainly say that
Yeah.
she was trained. Agnes Richards was born in Germany in 1891 and emigrated to Nebraska with her family. And as soon as she was old enough, she got a job at the Hastings Hospital for the Chronic Insane. And when you think about back then, that could be like 14 years old, you
Yeah.
know? There she meets her husband, and together they move to Chicago, where she trains as a nurse. They work at the Cook County Hospital.
Hmm.
They have a son, but sadly, her husband dies. So she moves back home to be with her family and works back in uh, Ohio this time, where she meets her second husband. And after World War II, she moves out with him to Patton State Hospital near San Bernardino. So she is spending her life training, seeing all manner of mental illnesses, all manner of treatments, all manner of situations.
Yeah.
And she goes to LA County Hospital and gets her RN. And about this time, the state of California says, okay, we realize that we are treating every mental issue the same.
Mhm.
So we're going to open up the idea that perhaps some patients can go to other places to be cared for in a less hospital-like
Yeah.
manner.
Yeah.
And she goes, I'm there. But not just to do that, which many places in our area in the Crescenta Valley along the San Gabriel Mountains, many sanitariums, most of them for respiratory issues, but there were also several for mental health issues.
Hmm.
And she focuses at first on women suffering from mild mental and nervous disorders.
Yeah.
Her idea is they are going to be able to be outside. They're going to be, in many cases, a literal home. She bought houses for them to be cared for in. They can be allowed to recover
Hmm.
and go home. I spoke a great deal with her granddaughter who ended up taking over Rock Haven, and she said a lot of times women just needed to be taken away from the situation that they were in and get over and pull themselves back together and then be able to go back to where they were, not just locked away, drugged, and forgotten.
Right.
And she made her focus to be on women only, because you can imagine the treatment still, the issues, not just for women being cared for with men nearby,
Right.
but being cared for by men.
Yes.
And you
Right.
still hear about those issues.
Yes.
And in doing so, not just giving these ladies safe care, but giving women jobs. and
Right.
helping them advance their education. And
Yeah.
the women that I've spoken to were just so grateful for the experiences that they were able to have and the support that they received from both Agnes and her granddaughter, Patricia Travis.
That's amazing. Got to speak with people who worked for her and then were treated by her, that they are willing to tell their story and that their testimony and oral history has been preserved. It's amazing.
Well, no one that's been treated has spoken with us. By the
Oh,
time we came in, it was in the
yeah.
1960s when mental health care changed. Patricia made it more about elder care.
Uh-huh.
And so the people that I would speak to would be family members of those who were
Right,
cared for,
right,
and they
right.
would tell us about how gorgeous
Mm.
it was, how beautiful the award-winning gardens were, how well the ladies were treated. They were never called patients. They were either called the
Ah,
residents or the ladies.
yeah.
But I was also able to meet some of the people who worked with Patricia. Very few that worked with Agnes. She passed away in 1967,
Mm.
but I did get a chance to meet some that would talk about her
That's so
and
cool.
her granddaughters. So.
Yeah. What drew you to Rockhaven and being part of the Friends?
Well, I grew up in this area,
Uh-huh.
and as soon as I saw that it was up for sale, I was concerned about us losing this space. I
Yeah.
remember driving with my mom, and she said Marilyn Monroe's mom was cared for there, and I heard Marilyn Monroe,
Right.
but no, it was just her mom. For
Yeah.
16 years, though, she was cared for there,
Oh.
and the Historical Society of the Crescenta Valley stepped in, and I had little kids at the time, so there really wasn't a whole lot I had time or
Mm.
what I felt that I could do. But the city of Glendale decided to purchase the property to protect our history. So it is one of about 25 sanitariums that were in the valley, the very
Wow.
last one that is fully intact. And they have this great idea to move the library down from several blocks down and letting the fire station expand into the library space. And the library will be here. And we have a historic park. And everybody says, hooray. And then the economy tanked. And
Yeah.
about 5 years later, the city starts getting interested in it again. My kids are older. I've actually trained as a docent, done a couple of things through PTA and various school things where I've learned some things about fundraising and various things that it's fascinating to me to have watched how it all stacked upon each other.
Uh-huh.
And the then president of the Historical Society said, "Hey, the city is interested in touring. Do you want to be involved?" And I said, "Well, I'm a trained docent. Yes, get me in there." And most of the stuff that I told were lies because what they learned was actually from newspaper clippings,
Oh no.
interviews that Agnes gave, and she liked to make up stories about herself
Oh
to
no.
sound much more impressive than she thought she was.
Yeah.
Whereas to us, for this young girl to have worked her way up
Right.
and to have taken care of so many women and their families,
Yeah.
just countless,
Right.
and such success, and continue to then be philanthropic and donate to so many other places and so many other things. Just absolutely, utterly remarkable
Yeah. That's
to us.
impressive in itself. Right.
Yeah. Oh, unbelievable. So I get in there and I absolutely fall in love with the place.
Yeah.
And the city says, hey, if you guys want to start having cleaning days again, and if you wanted to, you could start giving tours. And so I start learning the truth. I start learning more. I
Mm.
get to know more about the place and finding things that are there, meeting more people, collecting more stories. And one day the caretaker said, they were touring developers yesterday.
Oh
And we
no.
said, oh no, we can't just do this, we
Yeah.
need to step up. And all of a sudden, I'm a president of a corporation.
Just
And
like that.
along with, yeah,
Wow.
the
Yeah.
president and a couple
Yeah.
other people that have been involved with Rockhaven since the
That's
city
amazing.
bought it came along on the
Mm.
board, and we took off from there.
With when you mentioned those newspapers and how they were very exaggerated or at least it's plainly incorrect, where did
Yeah,
we find the correct information then? Where was that being held? How did you know the real history of Rockhaven in
the
that case?
granddaughters.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
So when you get out there and you try and tell people, hey, look, this is here, come and tour, learn this amazing history, come and see this fabulous place,
Uh-huh.
it starts to connect to different people. Hey, my mom was cared for there. Hey, I went and visited my grandmother there.
Okay.
I loved to go visit grandma.
Yeah.
Who says that about going to an old folks home,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
they love to go to this place and sit in the faux bois furniture next to the little fountain with the statue of the fishing gnome and
Mm,
play in the grass and talking with Patricia.
hmm.
She'd get a sweet smile on her face when she'd think about the people that would bring their boys and the boys would just run in the grass and how they enjoyed that. Just
Yeah.
really remarkable to me. And one person contacted me and said, my boyfriend's grandmother worked there and would like to talk to you. And I'm like, heck yeah.
Yep.
And she's still best friends with Patricia.
Uh-huh.
And through getting to meet her and talk with her, she then says, okay, I've talked to Pat and she would like to invite you over for lunch. And my mind is blown. And
Yep.
while I'm there, I get to meet her sister, the nun, meaning
Uh-huh.
both sister and a sister. And it's one of those wonderful things where the one is like, well, you just don't know the truth.
Mm.
And,
Tell me
and,
more.
and it's like the other one would say, well, actually, I will tell you the truth. But also, you do your own digging. When she
Yeah.
says, I
Yeah.
went to college to get a degree in psychology, you're like, a woman in the early 1900s getting a degree, and you look it up. No, she
Right.
didn't. And oh, there were various other things that we're still not sure. She claimed to be
Yeah.
a member of the Los Angeles Breakfast Club, which I am now a member
Oh
of
yeah.
because of
Yeah.
her.
Wow.
And but she would have been a member at a time that women weren't allowed to be members.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she claims to have been a member of the E-Bell. I have not found an E-Bell that has her name on the roster.
Right.
So,
Uh-huh.
there could be other things.
Yeah.
But by having, the one that was going to say, not reveal Graham's secrets,
Hmm.
and the other one that was like, oh, I'll tell you everything. So we
Yeah.
learned something by our own research,
Yep.
but then I learned a whole lot more by talking with
I
with the
mean, this,
granddaughters.
yeah, this speaks volumes to how we have to corroborate, even if the person's alive, even if the history is recent, it can be very distorted or it needs to be verified. And that's a lot of work, even for local history, that stuff needs to be well researched and documented.
As
So
best you can.
yeah, best we can, exactly. Now, what's fascinating to me about Rockhaven is when you're describing the kind of happy family-oriented environment of the facility. It's a facility that if someone told you it like a sanatorium, you would envision a very dismal, dark, death-ridden place. This is not the image Rockhaven is portraying, right?
Well, and frequently we would have people come on tour saying, how is the building? And we're like, well, you're going to be disappointed
Mm,
because it's not a hospital building where you're going to see shackles and things.
yeah,
It
yeah.
is a beautiful, well, what remains of beautiful 3.5 acres where women were cared for
Hmm.
with very special focused tender care.
Uh-huh.
But I'll tell you, one of my first tours, I had a lady come and say, would I be allowed to go into this room over here? And it was a building that we weren't allowed into. But we asked the caretaker and he said, sure, I'll take you in.
Uh-huh.
She says, when my mom passed away, she was staying in this room and I wasn't able to be here. So it's very
Oh,
nice to be able to see this.
yeah.
She says that when you drop off an Alzheimer's patient, it's best to do it early on so they can adjust to this being to
Mm,
their home. Nobody does. Everybody always waits until the last minute when it's very, very difficult. And she
yeah.
says she wasn't allowed to contact her for like a week because she has to know that this is her world and
Yeah.
this is the only space that exists. So she called to check in on her mom a couple days later and she said, hi, I asking about Mrs. Smith. And she said, she's doing very, very well, and she's an absolutely lovely addition to the Rockhaven facility.
Mm,
And she said, no, I mean, Mrs. John Smith. And she said, yes, she's doing very well and adjusting quite nicely. And she said, when I dropped her off, she was literally biting and kicking and punching. But being in a place where she had her nails done,
huh.
was made to be dressed, was made to go outside,
Yeah.
had her hair done, made to eat dinner in a community area and being treated with respect
Yeah.
changed the way that she behaved,
Hmm.
felt about herself, and treated other people. So then I start to get this idea about this being this magical place where the women come in and they get treated with dignity
Yeah.
and everything is lovely. And then I get talking to my friend Jeannie, who's the first nurse that I met.
Uh-huh.
And she says, oh, yeah, there was that time that I was changing a woman's diaper and she hit me on the head so hard I got a concussion.
Wow.
And yeah,
Yeah.
and it's just kind of, oh no, this is a very, very difficult
Yes.
time in life.
Yeah.
And I found a photo of a woman sitting in a swing outside, and she's just kind of slumped over to the
Mm,
side. And at first I thought, oh, no, that's not the way that I want to think about Rockhaven. And
right.
then I opened my mind up to the fact that she was dressed quite lovely.
Hmm.
She was outside. She
Yeah.
was sitting with a nurse who was reading to her.
Yeah.
So if you have to go through this miserable period of life, at least here is a beautiful place where you are going to get very nice treatment during that
Yeah.
time. So it meant even more
Yes.
to me.
I mean, that's amazing that Rockhaven didn't have to falsify or didn't have to set itself up when the camera showed up, right? It didn't
Yeah.
brush the crumbs off people. It didn't have them stand up straight just to take the photo. It took the real photo. And that's very rare when it comes to these medical facilities. They didn't have to, for lack of better words, dress it up for the
But
photo.
in the real photo,
Yeah.
they were dressed up. They did
Right.
have
Which
the
is
crumbs brushed
amazing.
off because that's the way that
Yeah.
they lived. Yeah.
Wow. So speaking of the buildings themselves, what is their current state? Because when you gave that tour, you said you weren't allowed to go into those buildings. Are
Yeah.
there some that are not, they're more private property, you could say? Or,
No, they're just not taken care of.
hmm,
So Patricia sells in 2001 to retire, and the Ararat Homes Company operated it as best as they could for about 5 years. But what they wanted to do was knock it all down and build a state-of-the-art Alzheimer's facility.
okay.
And they couldn't get the permits to be able to do that in this particular area of Montrose, Glendale. And so they put it on for sale. And of course, the people who are going to be interested in 3.5 oak covered acres with buildings built between 1920 and 1939 are people who are going to want to knock it down and build condos. And that's when the city of Glendale stepped in. And the walkways were meant to slope and undulate with the mountainside as part of the treatment of part of feeling like you are outside and in touch with nature, but that meant they were not ADA compliable.
Hmm.
So it could not be open to the public. When we would give a tour, the people would have to sign a waiver understanding the risks that
Uh-huh.
they were taking. And our favorite was that we understand that walking carries with it the risk of death. So,
Right.
but some of the buildings were just considered like the ceilings were starting to fall
Uh-huh.
in because by that time it had been closed for 3 years before Glendale bought it and then 5 years since they bought it.
Mhm.
So it wasn't in really great shape. Um, but then they still didn't have the money or the wherewithal or the decision of what they were going to do with it to put any more effort into it. So in our cleaning days, we're doing what we can to maintain it.
Mhm.
But when we find the roof's leaking, the only thing that we can do is tell them the roofs are leaking.
Yeah.
Um, one of the buildings though, and there was a point several years ago when our state senator got $8 million to give to the city to turn this place finally into the museum and park that Glendale
Yeah.
bought it to be. And it seemed like all of the decay began to accelerate rapidly at this point, and we're waiting 4 years is to do something, spend the money, protect the buildings. We got it listed on the historic registry early on to try and get it protection. Turns out that doesn't do a whole lot
No,
if they
unfortunately.
don't want to. Yeah. And at one point we walked into a building and I brought an architect friend and I said, "What's happening here?" And
Yeah.
she said the foundation is failing and the wall is starting to separate itself from the rest of the building.
Yeah.
So they're not in great shape
Yeah.
at this moment.
Mm-mm.
However, several months ago, the city of Glendale did finally decide something to do with the $8 million. And so they are working on putting in ADA compliable walkways and proper drainage so that things aren't going to be puddling under these foundations and
Yeah.
causing walls to want to separate. They did not do the roofs, but they did tarp the roofs. So there's a form of protection
Hmm.
on them. And the one building that we asked them to make into a museum so that it could be left alone and you could see all of the elements, all of the tiles, all
Yeah.
the amazing 1932 things that Agnes chose and put into this building is getting almost completely altered.
Oh,
And yeah, they're taking out a wall. They're trying to reuse the bathrooms. They're taking out a nurse's office and a closet in one of the rooms to make an ADA compliable walkway or a,
wow.
a bathroom.
Yeah.
Whereas we had ask them, put all that stuff outside and leave this building alone.
Uh-huh.
But I, one of the things that I'm learning is museums aren't supposed to be old. And they wanted to put a
Yeah.
bunch of modern and contemporary things in instead of creating a house museum.
Yep.
So that's where
I
I'm
agree with that.
sitting with
Yeah.
what's happening right now.
I mean, that's such a true point because I've worked in house museums, and the one I worked in most recently, we only had HVAC on the third floor where the collections was. So the first and
Oh, well, at
second
least.
floors, yeah, but the it was unbearable in the summer and freezing in the winter, and people were like, "Well, I guess we're living like they did." I'm like, "You
There you
kind of
go.
are." No, I
Now get
completely
some coal
understand.
to fire it all up. Yeah.
Better bundle up. Um, what, with this, the challenges you've guys been facing, have there been any wins? Have there been any positive outcomes that we're celebrating with Rockhaven? Because preservation, it's not like one and done, right? It's an ongoing process. But
Yeah.
what has been a win or a success in your mind in the recent history of Rockhaven?
It's really hard for me to see because I personally fought for what I thought was the least amount and and
Mhm.
and didn't get that. But
Yeah,
my husband is trying to remind me it is not a mini mall. It is not condos. It is not even a boutique hotel going
right.
for $350 a night, which is one of the things that they looked into doing. It wouldn't have worked.
Yeah,
It wouldn't have worked. There will be a building considered a museum, and the rest of the property will be ADA compliable with the idea that it can be open. Now, from what I understand, the city of Glendale does not believe that they can afford another park,
mm,
and they are trying to monetize it and figure out what to do with the other 13, 14 structures. So they have never declared that this will be a park. They're saying the only publicly accessible spot is the one right around that one building that's going to be the museum. So the win is at this moment,
yeah,
buildings are still there.
yep. Honestly, yeah, that could be the bare minimum win that they are, and they weren't just immediately demolished when those developers came through.
Or when the wall started to separate,
Right.
even it's still
Right.
it's still there. They're doing something at the moment. So
It's interesting because I've been to a couple sites here in Virginia where I live, where the buildings were preserved, transformed into apartments. Like there was a prison I went to recently where they kept the original walls, and it's really cool, but there's
amazing.
no historical plaques. There's no
No.
information. Like you have to know about it to know what this was. It looks like a really ugly apartment complex. You're like, what are these towers? What was this place?
Why in the world would you want to live in a place
Yeah.
like this?
Right? Why are there bars so high on the windows? Like like it's odd. You're like, it must have been something. But there's no piece of information. There's not a lick of literature. There's no like plaque. There's no standing interpretive table. So for me, it's almost like, wow, we saved the
Amazing.
place, but nobody knows what it was. Nobody knows
Yeah.
where they're living, or there's a park inside people can go to. There's a Taco Bell. There's a whole bunch of places, a gym, and they don't know they're getting groceries in a
Wow.
former incarceration facility, right?
That's
So
amazing.
for you guys to even have a place, a designated building to even tell the story, in
Yeah.
my opinion, is such a win. Because even if the buildings were preserved, turn into something else, it's like maybe people won't know where they are, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
maybe the name Rock Haven will, hopefully not, but maybe they're going to drop that name. Maybe it's not going to be the Rock Haven Resort and Spa.
Yeah, it depends. It depends on who
Yeah,
ends up
right.
monetizing the rest of the property. They get to
Yeah.
decide. Yeah.
This happened also in Virginia, a lot of Virginian examples, but there was the Western State Hospital down in central Virginia, and it is now the Blackburn Inn and Spa, and they
Mm.
kept the original administration building. Pretty cool, but again, on their website it says about us, history, and it's like this was a facility to care for the mentally ill. Anyways, in 2008, we have acquired the
Right.
property, and it's like, okay,
Yeah.
sure. The
And
skirts over.
yeah.
And what's interesting about the one in Virginia, this spa is there is the hospital cemetery across the street and it's just
Mm.
kind of staring at you. So if you like go on the front steps of the resort and you turn around and look across the street, you can see it in the distance and it's just there. And I'm, of course, I'm happy that the building was preserved.
Yeah.
At the same time, there's not a stick of information about what this was. And I know
Wow.
I know logistically, of course, if you advertise this was a spooky, scary hospital, no one's going to want to come into your resort and, stay
Which
there.
isn't true at all.
Right. Because
There are people
people
who will
love
pay
that stuff.
more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I
Um,
said, we had a lot of
yeah.
people that thought they were going to be disappointed when they came and saw what a lovely place it was, but
Hmm.
their hearts were turned, being
Right.
impressed that there was such a place like it out there. So,
Yeah, so I want to ask, in terms of how the public can get involved, are there any, I know you guys are working very much at the grassroots level and working very much at the local level, but for people here, like maybe they're here with me in Virginia or they're watching on YouTube, where can they go to get more information about Rockhaven? How can they help?
friendsofrockhaven.org is our website. We're also on a couple of forms of social media
Uh-huh.
that we can handle. Just as long as you look for Friends of Rockhaven, you should be able to find us. We are mostly focused at this point on taking care of what archives we got from Patricia Travis's estate and getting what archives we know of up there and out there, preserved and accessible for researchers and anybody who's interested in learning about uh, women's health care, women's treatment, mental health
Hmm.
care, treatment, and specifically the things that went on here.
So thank you so much for talking with me and educating everyone here about Rockhaven and what the Friends are doing.
No, thank you for having me.
Check out the links below to the Friends of Rockhaven to connect with them and learn how you can help preserve these buildings. Thanks for watching. Until next time.